Welcome to another episode of So in the Know, a podcast that brings real conversation about housing, home ownership, and the communities that we live in. Today's guest has a story that you will not forget. Joseph Vambe is one of Britain's youngest Labour councillors. And his story into politics was somewhat unexpected through the support of a famous rap artist, Stormzy. Now, in this episode, Joseph shares how this journey shaped his career. He'll also give us his take on the housing crisis and how our communities can be stronger together. And we're also going to explore how shared ownership could be a part of the solution. So whether you're looking to rent, buy, or just feel inspired, this podcast is for you. Thank you, Joseph, for joining us today. Now, you've got such an inspiring journey from growing up in the Rockingham estate, studying at Cambridge, and serving as Southwark's youngest councillor. But let's take it right back to the beginning. What was it like growing up in Elephant and Castle?
Hi, Sarah. Growing up in Elephant and Castle, I would describe it as fun. It was, I guess, just before the tech revolution where everyone was on their phones and online. I grew up with a real sense of community, if I'm honest. I took it for granted how in the kind of right in the centre of London I was and am. But with that brought just immense privileges just through being in central London, being able to go, to Parliament, to London Eye, just by walking and being out with friends. So that was the real joy of growing up on the estate that I grew up on, which I guess, looking back, helped overshadow the challenges, the inevitable challenges of growing up on an estate, in a city, and the various dramas that occur with, crime, violence, drugs, and the lack of opportunity. And so, when I look back, at the time, I would say it was really tough because you struggled in those times where you'd come home from school and be quite weary of what's going on because there was always something going on. But that, now looking back and seeing kind of how the world has changed and evolved, that sense of community, that sense of knowing your neighbours and people taking a real interest in you and caring about you, was something I look back fondly.
So what was that light bulb moment then that made you think, I want to have a career in politics?
There wasn't really a light bulb moment, if I'm honest. I think I was just, so unusually, I studied economics at secondary school. That's not something people usually do. And through that, I just developed an interest for kind of political economy, for debating, for analysis, for government. And through kind of different opportunities like debating classes and other kind of political opportunities, I think I just was good at it. Maybe I just at that time I was just good at talking, I guess. I could speak well and I cared about it. And as I began to learn more, particularly when studying subjects like economics and then at sixth form government and politics, I just began to learn that actually through politics you could everything happens. It felt like to me, I was studying and I felt like all the major decisions, all the key transformations that happen in the world happen because politicians make key decisions. And so if I wanted to change, the type of environment I was in or the type of opportunities I was getting, I saw my families getting, my friends getting, it felt like, the way to do that is through politics.
Yeah.
And so I think I just began to learn that actually, if I want to change things, I should do that through politics. And it felt really, I really had a tunnel vision moment where I felt like this is the only way. And I think that is where if there was a light bulb moment, that was where it was, where I genuinely thought, you can't do any. What's the point in doing any other job? Because this is the job that changes things, and I think that's where my passion.
Yeah, you can
from.
really feel that passion coming out there. And you were one of the original Stormzy scholars. I mean, how did that even come about? How did you get involved in the Stormzy scholarship?
So it was when it was about, I think, so I was in sixth form 2016 to 2018. And during that point, I would have been applying to university. And I was thinking about applying to Oxford because I thought, where do top politicians go to? And usually they go to Oxford to do PPE. And so that's all I knew. Until my teacher said, actually, I did this course at Cambridge and I think you'd be really great. And I said, okay, I trusted my teacher, as you do. And so I went with the flow. She kind of directed what college to apply for, etc. And I just went through the motions. And fortunately enough, I was, accepted after interview. And so that was great. And then a few months after I was accepted that interview, I found out that Stormzy was doing this scholarship where he would pay for 2 black students to go to Cambridge. And so, it wasn't planned or anything, but it was just like a perfect storm because obviously I've been offered a place at Cambridge and now I'm hearing that Stormzy's offering to pay for 2 students to go to Cambridge. So inevitably I applied.
Must have been quite a surreal offer at the time.
Yeah, at the time I didn't... A lot of new things was happening at the time, right? You've already been offered a place at Cambridge, which already feels surreal, and you're already quite feeling on cloud 9. And so I don't think you appreciate what's happening in the time. I just remember my politics teacher saying, Joseph, do you know Stormzy? And I'm like, yes, of course. And then she goes, there's this scholarship, you should apply to it. And I applied and I was selected. And
amazing.
I just received a phone call that summer in 2018 saying, hi, Joseph, just wanted to let you know that, you've been offered the scholarship. Stormzy would like to meet you. When are you free?
So you're like, I just need to check my calendar.
Yeah. I was like, when am I free? When are you free? When is he free? And yeah, the rest is history.
Amazing. What was it like meeting him?
So I met him a couple of weeks later from when I found out the news, and that was a big moment. He came in, he's just a huge guy, really tall, huge guy, but really down to earth, and he was just genuinely interested in our stories. And you could see from meeting him, I learned why he was doing this. He was doing this because he really cares about social mobility. He really cares about representation and prosperity. And so we just talked. We talked about my journey. We talked about his journey because he did quite well in school. We talked about music and we just, it was nice. We had a nice dinner. It was a fun day.
Have you kept in touch?
So I see him about once a year.
Okay.
So he'll come to Cambridge and meet. So the great thing about the scholarship, and this is like a lesson for all people trying to do something impactful, you never know how it can snowball. And so he started off with 2, me and Drew. And then, HSBC came in and said, we'll pay for a further 10. And so it's just really snowballed. And so now every year there's about 13 scholars, I think, at Cambridge as a result of what Stormzy started. And so he'll come to Cambridge to meet the new Stormzy scholars and we'll have a nice catch up and stuff. So it's really nice.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's really nice.
He must absolutely love your journey and where you've got to.
Yeah.
So I think it's great what he's done. It's obviously been quite impactful on you. But since that scholarship launch, there's actually been a rise in admissions from black students at Cambridge. What kind of impact do you think things like this have on young people that might not have considered university before? Yeah,
that's like a debate that goes on how many decades about, should you support one particular group that's unrepresented when we hope to live in a society where you don't need to support a particular group because everyone has equal opportunity. but I think the scholarship recognised that actually barriers to black students applying to Cambridge wasn't a lack of interest or enthusiasm or ability. It was actually through kind of stereotype and aspiration and opportunity. And so when there's a particular group that doesn't feel like a particular institution is for them, which clearly was the case, then something like the scholarship is really intentional and it helps open those doors. And that's what it did. Black students just weren't applying to places like Cambridge and Oxford, not because they're not smart enough to apply to Cambridge and Oxford, but because they felt like those places weren't for them. But when you have someone like Stormzy, who's a really popular artist, saying, actually, I'm going to empower you to go to these institutions, I'm going to help support you, then you're like, oh, actually, this place could be for me. I'm going to try this. And I think it really broke down a stereotype. When I first got to Cambridge, I felt like it wasn't for me. And then you get there and you meet people and you learn actually it's a really different place, but actually is for me, and you own it and you make it your home. And I think that's why you've seen the kind of improved numbers as a result of the scholarship, and he's quite visionary.
Incredible
in that sense.
And it's not just Stormzy who's been inspiring students as well. You also mentor students, is that right? Tell us a bit about your experiences of mentoring.
Well, I arrived in Cambridge just feeling it was great, right? Arriving in Cambridge, this whole new world. But, I was in second set in secondary school. So that means there was a top set of 30 students that were academically smarter than me at my secondary school. Now, that secondary school was placed into special measures and ultimately forced to close down. I went to a really good sixth form, with great teachers, and that's what really changed my prospects. So when I arrived to Cambridge, all I could think was I was in second set, and I arrived here because I went to a really good sixth form with great teachers and great support around me. But what about all the students who were in top set that actually didn't even go to university? So that's a clear disparity, where there's opportunity versus non-opportunity. And we hope to live in a society where, everyone has the same opportunities to go to a top university. And so that's why I went there really from day one thinking, okay, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, because it felt really crystal clear about the work that's needed, and it's a support for students and schools that don't have the resource to support students that have high aspiration, that have the ability to go to top institutions. And so that's where that was born out of. And so I just started going to those schools and reaching out to those schools to say, look, I can mentor your brightest students because I understand the barriers that exist within the school that mean that maybe they won't be able to achieve their full potential. And so I was on a kind of one-man crusade at that point, and that just grew. It's got to start
with one.
Exactly.
Amazing. And do you think that there's more that schools could be doing in terms of education on, financial matters, buying a home, anything to that effect?
I recognise that through my work with schools, that schools are severely constrained, particularly during this period. And there's, if you ask them to do more, do stuff different, they would probably see that as impossible. I think it's for government. I guess it goes back to the point where I feel like politics is the vehicle to change and everything. But I do think there is a role for, the government to play in financial education, because the facts outline that if you're from a poorer background, your financial literacy skills would be basically at the bottom. And that's what I found when I got to Cambridge. I was around these pupils, these other students and friends and peers, and, we were talking about finances, and I found that actually the biggest kind of disparity between us wasn't in education and academia, but it was when they're talking to me about stocks and shares ISAs, and I'm like, what's that? Or they're talking to me about credit and credit ratings, and I'm like, what's that? We were never taught that in school, so how do you know this? But actually that's just come from their parents and through kind of being in a fortunate upbringing. But what about all those students that come from a less fortunate upbringing? So I think if we're serious about equality, if we're serious about fairness, how can financial literacy not be part of it? That's so important. That's the key to buying a house. That's the key to, having security, to prosperity, to growing, to generational wealth. And was never taught that. I was never taught any of that.
Neither was I. Neither was I at school. And I know that that's something that our organisation is quite passionate about. And that's why we do these podcasts. And we also go out to schools and chat with students as well. But do you think that earlier intervention at school could help break down those sort of generational cycles of poverty and really have an impact?
Absolutely. Because, again, I speak for myself. I wasn't saving. I had no ambition to say, I'm going to save to buy a house one day. That was never the thinking. And the ironic thing, and as crazy as this sounds, there are people who from a very young age are saving, are thinking long term, because they've been taught by their parents, actually, this is important because over time, the money you've been investing, the money you've been saving will grow with a compound interest. That actually, here's how prices increase in the home ownership side of things. So you need to be preparing yourself from now so that you don't regret it later. And so it's absolutely paramount. And the facts speak for itself. Those students and those people that have been trained and equipped and embedded with financial literacy skills from a young age tend to be more financially secure and prosperous over the long term. Those that are less secure and less, uncertain, find themselves in difficult situations. You know that better than anyone, because shared ownership is a clear example of this. You've got people that are very, very aware, people that are very financially literate. Okay, it's too unaffordable to own a house, so that's difficult, but actually I can save and I can get shared ownership, and that can get me on the property ladder, rather than going into an extortionate rental sector where I have no ownership, where that money's going to someone else and not to me. And so they get themselves on the property ladder. But the people that are not aware of shared ownership are paying extortionate amounts of rent with no stake in society. And so that's a prime example of why financial literacy is so important.
It really is. And for research purposes for the podcast, I did reach out to some teachers in and around the communities to see what their feel was on having something added into the curriculum. And the response was quite surprising. I thought they'd be more for it, but, and they raised a very valid point. Teachers have to do so much now, so much more than their actual role. They act as sort of social workers in some respects as well as their chosen subject that they're teaching. They feel it's such a specialist niche area. It's something that would need to be delivered perhaps by an external, someone from a financial institution. So I get the concern, but I feel it's so important.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, it's I've got lots of strong links to people in education, particularly secondary school. And a good friend of mine is a head teacher of a secondary school in London. And anytime I make a suggestion about what needs to be changed in education, there's immediate pushback. We're already doing this, we're already doing that, which is so understandable, and which shows the kind of any changes is going to need an absolute investment and resource.
Yeah, I agree. But you became Southwark's youngest elected councillor. I mean, that must feel pretty amazing. But what did it feel like? What did it mean to you?
It was exciting. It was surreal, because I really didn't think I was going to get it. Just because you just looked at the demographic of councillors and they're not young, and they're a lot more experienced in terms of life and work. And so I felt like it's a long shot, but I should go for it, because I care about politics. I care about the change that can happen through politics and what I can do for my community. I care about representation of young people. And I felt the best way to do that was through local politics. I feel like that's the best way, really get on the ground, knocking on doors, all those kind of foundational elements of local politics. But it was really exciting, yeah. 'Cause, like, it was just being selected, right? Because you get selected to stand in a seat. That was so exciting in itself, and I wasn't even elected yet. But then running the campaign and being elected and speaking about issues that you really care about was just amazing. And it's a real privilege actually to be a local councillor, particularly for an area where I was born, raised, grow up, still live. Like, I think it's easy now, coming up to 4 years being a councillor, to forget that. But when I go back to 2022 in May, when I was elected, it's like the euphoria, the optimism.
I bet that feeling must have been incredible.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
But you mentioned being sort of surrounded by older generations. What is that like? Do you feel that you're heard? You're obviously representing a younger generation, which is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's strange, because you're not used to kind of working or even directing people that got a world more experience than you and have a whole different outlook on life just through experience and being a lot older than you. So it is a challenge, but I think there's two things I'll say. I think representation's good in itself. Mm-hmm. So my thinking on representation is you need to represent people, young, old, ethnicity wise, because there are cultural differences with all those different demographics that mean having those people in positions of power inevitably lead to positive outcomes for those communities. So I see myself as a young person in the council as representing them. Now, I won't agree with every person my age on what society should be, but there are lots of similarities that I'll be able to speak up for from a young person's perspective. And then there's just a different outlook and perspective on life, and then a sense of being in touch with the issues that young people are facing. And I would say throughout our whole political society and throughout a lot of political history, young people tend to vote less, so there's less representation of young people in parliament, in politics, and the inevitable consequence of that is that young people's issues and things that we care about are kind of put to the side, whether intentionally or unintentionally. If you don't have those people in those positions of power, how are those opportunities for young people going to be implemented? And so I see myself as someone really trying to I see myself as a disruptor in that sense, and saying, come on guys, this is what needs to be done, this is what we should be doing. But I also see myself as someone providing balance and providing representation of young people's issues. It is a challenge. It's different from being in a place where everyone's your age, but I think it's a cause worth fighting for.
I agree. And from the work that you've done, what would you say is the biggest challenge that Gen Zers are experiencing that perhaps the older generation doesn't quite understand?
There's a few, isn't there? Yeah. Gosh, there's a few. I think 3, I would say. Can I give 3? Am I allowed to give 3?
Yeah, go for it. Give 3.
So 1, I would say, is on kind of just work. So in the past, you would have had, the ambition would say, go to university, you're going to get a great job, right? We've moved to a place where pretty much most people go to university, and the workforce has changed such that actually even having a degree from a really top university is no guarantee for a job in the workplace, because actually employers are looking for experience, and there's a detachment between what you've learned at university and a real life job that you're doing. And so you've got thousands of young people that go to university, particularly the top universities, feeling on top of the world, and then looking for jobs to apply to, and getting rejected by all these jobs because they don't have the work experience. And so university is not the driver of social mobility it once was, because people are not find themselves in really great work opportunities. Actually, a lot of university graduates are actually regressing, and they're in a lot of kind of real top corporate jobs, those individuals that didn't go to university and perhaps did an apprenticeship are finding themselves more senior than the university graduates.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that's something I would say is a real challenge, because everyone's gone to university and then they end up doing a job that they're not particularly happy with. Second one, which obviously you relate to, is this question of property. And, you know, it's such a huge challenge, because the rental sector, particularly in London, but also outside of London, is so unaffordable. So how does say a 21-year-old now get a job in London, and now they're expected to pay £2,000 a month rent when their salary is probably less than that? It's absolutely unaffordable. And so now we've moved into a place where graduates are kind of renting a room with a few of their mates and paying extortionate rents for a room. People are paying £1,000 for a room.
Wow.
£1,000 a month for a room. So when we're thinking about social mobility, when we're thinking about saving for a deposit, how can you do that when the world of work is a challenge, because you've gone to university and gotten this huge amount of debt, and now you're on a job that's quite a low salary, and you can't afford to pay your rent. You have to rent a room, and even then you can't save for a deposit. So that's the real challenge. And then the third challenge, I would say, and this is something I've found from just speaking to lots of young people, there's a real entrepreneurial zeal, I think, that we as young people have. People have an entrepreneurial backbone, and they want the opportunity to explore those abilities. You know, how can I build something? How can I work for myself one day? How can I build a company? How can I improve society through creating something? And I don't think our society and our country is set up to help those young people succeed. And so when I hear the statements and the budgets that come out, I think because there's a lack of young people in those environments, there's not a budget that is supporting young entrepreneurs in society, of which there are many, but they don't have the opportunity. They're working the jobs that they need to work to get them by, to pay their rent, and therefore they can't flourish. And I think there is a whole world, maybe it's just the people I speak to, but I speak to lots of young people, and there are lots of young people with a real entrepreneurial drive and skill that's not being unlocked, because they don't have the support, they don't have the supplies and the need that they can to be risk takers, to help. And ultimately, you know, we're thinking about what's going to bring growth to the country. Why have we been stagnating for nearly 2 decades? I think entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial drive is what could unlock this country.
Absolutely. And I think as well, I mean, you touched upon it, the house prices, you know, in London and surrounding, you know, they've gone up exponentially. Salaries haven't really followed suit. So it is increasingly harder for people to get their foot on the property ladder, which is why, you know, shared ownership can be a really good option. But Joseph, what's your housing situation? Are you renting? Do you buy? You living with family? What are you doing?
Yes, I live at home with family. So I live where I grew up, on the Rockingham estate, and I live at home with family, which is nice. And obviously the ambition is to one day own a property, to get on the home ownership property ladder. But that's not something I can do right now. So I feel trying to equip myself to be able to get on the property ladder one day, but also trying to educate and help others, particularly who are at earlier stages, to start preparing themselves. Because, you know, I've experienced the private rented sector. I lived in private rented accommodation for 2 years, and it was absolutely challenging and difficult, and so I know the struggles, I know the impact on your income that can have, and it just shows why. And ideologically, I believe that everyone I believe that everyone should have a stake in society, and I believe that stake should be property. And so, ideologically, I'd love for us all to have a property, and we need to kind of address the challenges that are preventing that.
And, private renting, it's not secure tenure, is it? So your landlord could, ask for the property back at, any given time. And I was actually interviewing some first-time buyers at one of the first-time buyer events that we go to, and this young man was telling me that he was privately renting, and his rent had gone up by, I think it was over 40% or something. So it was a significant hike in rent, and it just made it completely unaffordable. And what he'd learned is that by saving a bit, he could put a deposit down on a shared ownership home. The monthly costs worked out roughly the same as, actually a little bit less after his landlord had put the prices up, but he owned a percentage of that home, so he was actually investing in his own equity, and that worked out really well for him. But yeah, privately renting is a problem, and from what I understand from conversations with people in the financial sector, renting is only likely to rise because there's so many landlords now that are pulling their homes from the market, which is obviously lifting the rental prices. Yeah. So it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And how they also get you is they try and offer, this is what happened to me, they offer a discount or like a zero deposit discount for the first year. But then, so you feel, okay, this is quite a discount for the first year. But then the second year, it goes right up to market rates. Oh. And so they try and draw you in to then kind of extort you in the second year. And just renting generally, it just feels like such a waste because you're paying to live.
Yeah.
But it's not yours. And so that's why having a mortgage, that's why owning your own homes, it's so much more satisfying. It makes you feel like you have a stake, because even with shared ownership, you're paying for your stake, whereas renting, you're just paying to live, and that doesn't feel good.
No, and having your monthly payments go up quite considerably, within a couple of months, it's hard. And one of the things that we do as an organisation to qualify buyers for shared ownership is they have to go through an affordability assessment with a financial advisor. And they don't just calculate it for the year ahead, they do it over a 5-year period. So costs will go up, they'll go down as time goes on. Your rent will go up. It's all detailed in the lease. Service charges can go up depending on what your estate charges are. So there are things that you have to bear in mind, but you can sit down with a financial advisor and they can map out what 5 years would look like and make sure that it's affordable and sustainable. Plus, of course, if you're in an area where prices are on the up, you're making money on your investment.
So important.
But it's great that you're still living in the heart of your communities. And one of the biggest parts of being a councillor is listening and engaging with residents. But how do you communicate with your residents?
The old-fashioned way. We should go out and knock on doors.
Okay.
And we speak to people. It's a weird world we live in, because obviously everything is online and digital, and so I guess there is an appetite to be more digital, particularly with our communications as a council, like social media, e-letters, newsletters, updates, etc. But I find personally the best way of communicating with people, particularly the residents in my ward, it's just going out and knocking on doors and speaking to them, going to community events. It's still, and that's what I really love. It's really vibrant, and I find it, it's been the most effective way for me to understand what's going on in my community. So just a couple of Saturdays a month, go out with my team, we just go and knock on doors and we say hi, introduce myself, and we just say, what's going on, what's up, is there anything you want to talk about?
Nothing beats the art of good old-fashioned conversation,
does
it? So how can people connect with you?
They can connect with me online. I'm on Instagram. I am on LinkedIn. You just type in my name. My email is available online. So
lots of pictures of you with Stormzy come up. I've googled you.
Yeah. Those exciting pictures. I guess those are the most popular pictures. My claim to fame. So yeah, I just type in my name online. Happy to meet, go for a coffee, catch up.
Fab.
If people are interested in these issues.
Now, you're also involved with Christian Aid, which is a charity that deals with humanitarian issues. But how do you balance local challenges in Southwark and global concerns? How does that work?
I find it really helpful because it provides perspective. Sometimes we can get consumed by our own area. I'm really passionate about this country and direction. I'm really passionate about London, really passionate about Southwark. Working for Christian Aid, it aligns with kind of my core beliefs on social justice, on, people being free from poverty. And I recognise that actually, despite the challenges that exist in this country, in London and Southwark, there are greater challenges that people are facing, particularly in the global south, the climate crisis, wars, devastation. And so I'm really passionate. I'm passionate about people and people being able to live freely and a better life. And I love Christian Aid and the work that they do because they really care about international aid and helping people across the world, and the poorest countries. And so how do I balance that?
Yeah, how do you find the time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess you just go through. I guess I'm in my 20s and I've got lots of energy. I think that's what it is.
24 hours in a day, you can do a lot
you
with
can
those
just
hours,
you
right?
just you just go. And I enjoy it. You have to do things. This is what I tell people: whatever you do in work, you have to enjoy it. I remember it's like when I used to be in French classes in secondary school. I hated it, so it felt like that hour would go on for 5 hours. But when I was in my political classes, it would go in 5 minutes, because when you're enjoying something, you do it and you take pride in what you do. And so there's a huge difference between doing a job that you don't like versus doing a job that you do like. And so I love it. I love lobbying. I love speaking to people. I love helping support causes that are going to change people's lives. And so that's where I found the time.
I love that. And they do say, if you do a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life, don't they?
Okay, I wouldn't go that far, but fair.
But what do people in your community worry about the most?
Housing.
Yeah, okay.
Housing. We have a long waiting list for people that need housing. And it's not just homeless, people that are homeless. So that's kind of the obvious one. You see people who are on the street that need housing and accommodation. But what people don't see is the families of 4 or 5 living in a 1-bedroom flat and are clearly overcrowded with maybe 2 boys and 2 girls living. Like it's really tough. Like, where are these kids supposed to do their homework? How are these kids of different ages? That it's such a congested household that many families in Southwark are living in. And so it's definitely housing, because we need bigger houses. We need 3, 4, 5-bedroom houses built in Southwark. But we also need affordable housing and social housing built in Southwark. So housing is the number one issue.
Yeah, and I mean, shared ownership is obviously suggested as an alternative to renting, and particularly in areas like Southwark. But what are your thoughts on shared ownership? Do you see it as that stepping stone for first-time buyers?
It has been a stepping stone for first-time buyers. So my experience with shared ownership is through speaking to people that have gone that route. And it has been, it's been, buying a house is getting to a point where it's impossible, particularly in London. Shared ownership makes it possible. Still difficult because it can be very expensive. But it's a route, it's a stepping stone. And I think it's proved to be a stepping stone for a lot of people that I've come into contact with that have gone that route. And so I think the question is about raising awareness. Now, with all things, buying a house, shared ownership, not shared ownership, like you said, people need to know about the cost. There are various cost, service charges, additional fees that you need to be aware of so that you know you can afford it. But people should know that actually there is an alternative to private renting, and shared ownership is that route. Now, there's obviously improvements that I think that could be made to make it even more affordable.
Yeah.
Can the percentage entry fee of a sharing a house be less? You know, can we reduce that? Because again, as much as I've met people that have got into the shared ownership board, I've got lots of people that in our community that have said, I've looked into the shared ownership world and even that's too expensive too, which is a real thing. And so we need to look at barriers for reducing that. And if we're thinking about shared ownership as a stepping stone, how can we reduce the shares? I know it's typically around 25%. Can it be reduced further so that people with less
And
amounts
some
can
schemes,
do that?
you can go down as low as 10%, but the problem is lenders won't lend. Because you're looking into the remit of a personal loan rather than a mortgage, and that's the challenge that we've found, because it doesn't even come near to the minimal amount that you can borrow on. So it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and that's the work that needs to be done. Getting lenders to be able to allow that opportunity for people to get those mortgages at 10% or even less, so that people can get on the property ladder and make that stepping stone. Again, I come back to it, can that be mandated by central government? Who knows? But these are the things that need to be looked into, because we're getting to the... I think it's being long understood that buying a house in London is very difficult for the average person. Shared ownership is possible for the average person, but definitely lower percentage shares will help more people get on that property ladder. And it's just about aspiration. When people get onto the property ladder, it's something that people really care about deeply. It makes them feel like they're going somewhere positive. It's good for your mental health, it's good for your well-being, it's good for your future prospects. And so I guess you've highlighted where that work needs to be done with mortgage lenders and allowing that opportunity.
And we have actually got a development that we're going to be launching soon. It's in Peckham, of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. I don't have any more detail other than that. They're about to be launched and we're just waiting for the valuers to go in, so that the prices will be up soon. But if anyone is interested in that development, you can go on our website, sharedownership.co.uk, and have a look. It's called So Resi Peckham.
That must be exciting.
Yeah, it's always very exciting when we launch a new scheme. But there's so many people that do, as you say, they feel that home ownership is so out of reach. But what could councils and housing providers do better to educate communities?
Yeah, the educational piece. I think it's a general communications question. How can we better speak to people in this modern world that we live in, right? That's just a challenge that we are facing generally. How to communicate and it's a challenge. And I think it's a mix of all things, from being out on the doors and speaking to people and being at community events, to compiling a list and being at those events that you said, like those first time buyer events, people that are interested. How can you put on those events, right? If there was, and you have to be in touch with the aspiration of people. People are aspirational. So if we put on an event that said how to own your own home one day, that would get a lot of people attending that. And so I think there is a work to be done with organisations like the council, like ourselves, with partners like yourselves and others, to join and to have these events and to put them on and to really be proactive about it, because we're all in it together. So if someone goes from a council house property to buying a property via shared ownership, the council's gain because the council has a council home that they can use to house families that desperately need
Very
it.
true, yeah.
Win. And partner organisations like yourselves benefit because you've got someone who's bought a property it's a win-win for all. So we really are in this together, and so I think talking more and being part of it together more is the only way, because we genuinely are trying to work out how to communicate with people better. So you'll be asking yourselves the same question: what are the different things we're doing? We should be doing that together because it's a win-win for each other. And actually, people think it's easier to communicate now. I think it's even more challenging because people are receiving information across a variety of channels, across a variety of kind of ecosystems. So we need to be doing it together. But definitely we can be doing a better job at Southwark Council and communicating.
Yeah, and I agree. I think you've just tapped into something there as well, because we run so many events on, first time buying, but not to the people who are just thinking about, is it even possible? And those are the people that I'd love to reach out to and just show how it is possible. And yeah, it'd be great if we could find a way of working together and reaching a wider audience. But what role do you see shared ownership playing for the community of Southwark?
A vital one. It's the inevitable next step, and I think shared ownership again is at the beginning of its kind of phase and relevance, because when we're looking at how to solve the housing crisis, we're talking about we need to build millions of new homes, correct? We need more social housing, correct? But we need to be in touch with the aspiration of people, which is to buy a house. And that's the thing that people are going to catch on to. That's the thing that people are excited about, that gets enthusiasm, that gets people engaged. And so that's going to be the key to kind of solving the housing crisis, I think, shared ownership. And I don't think it's got the attention that it needs yet. I think it needs to get attention. Again, it's hard to fight against. People just think about home ownership as getting a mortgage and you own your own home and et cetera, and then you don't really think of anything else. I didn't really think of anything else. Shared ownership needs that publicity. It needs to be seen as, the way through to having a stake in society, just like right to buy was. Right, right to buy got this. Right to buy was the thing. It got all the publicity. It was the thing that people were like, yes, okay, I could buy. That's what shared. That's the type of presence a platform shared ownership needs, because that is the solution, and it's an exciting solution, and I think it's one that has worked to become more affordable. And we touched on the kind of lenders part of it, but I think it's the inevitable next step.
Yeah, I agree. We help hundreds of people achieve, home ownership through shared ownership every year. And it is a really great product. And it's also secure tenure. And having that, sense that this is your home and it's a secure place to live. But what do you think having housing stability would mean for your residents?
Everything. We say in Southwark that housing, good, safe, secure housing is a human right. And we mean that. It's a human right. And that's why, a lot of our ambition and aspiration as a council is geared towards housing. That's our thing. Particularly social housing, because we recognise the need. And so, we are one of the biggest landlords in the country, and we're always in the top 3 in terms of boroughs across the country that's building council housing, because we recognise that it is a human right to have safe, secure, stable housing. And we recognise that in private rented sector, there isn't that security, and we recognise that people are struggling to buy their houses, and so we feel the responsibility to provide that, but recognising that we can't do that ourselves, and that's why I generally believe social housing is a key to providing people with security, but shared ownership is the aspiration. That's where we want people to get to. And so that's why I say we really are in this together.
Absolutely. And so, Joseph, you've talked with such passion about everything that you do, and I really love that. But what's next for you, and I guess for the people of Southwark?
Yeah, well, it's what's next for me. I'm excited about building a coalition of people that care about the issues that I'm campaigning on. I'm excited that we have a government that seem engaged and intent on building homes, that seem intent and engaged on providing safe, secure housing for people. And so I am excited about the future. I know like people can see society and how expensive things are in this country and think things are a bit grim, but I do think we're entering a phase of kind of uplifting and prosperity and almost societal progress in this country. And so I just see myself as a key player in that, really. Hopefully in Southwark, hopefully in London, hopefully in this country, but wherever the kind of opportunities lead, like I said, I think politics and politicians have a huge platform and responsibility for implementing change and creating the type of society we all want and we want our children to grow up in. And so I hope that I can continue along that journey.
Amazing. And lastly, Joseph, for anyone listening who perhaps comes from a similar background to you that wants to get involved in politics or changing communities or buying a home, what advice would you give them?
So number one advice I would give is be deluded. I think that's what's helped me. Different things work for different people, but I was just very deluded, I think, and that delusion has got me to where I am, and I'm still deluded. Still believe that we're going to solve this housing crisis. I still believe that we're going to unlock the entrepreneurial zeal of young people. I believe that this country is going to be the greatest country on earth because of what we're going to do together, and that's through delusion. And I was deluded in thinking I would get to Cambridge. I got to Cambridge, deluded in thinking I'd get the Stormzy scholarship, deluded in thinking I'd become a councillor. So I think there is something. It's weird to say to someone you should be deluded. Weird advice, maybe bad advice, but it worked for me. So I would say be deluded in the sense that be optimistic. Sometimes, and it felt for me, this is why I say be deluded. You look at your circumstance, you look what's around you, and you think, I couldn't do that. Like, of course I couldn't do that. And I say be deluded because once you're deluded, you start to see beyond your circumstances. And that's where I think things become possible. It was possible for me. So that's why you asked for the advice. So that's what I would
Well,
give.
I think one thing's for sure, we need more people like you in politics.
Thanks.
But thank you, Joseph. You tell such a wonderful story, and I have no doubt that you're going to go on and do amazing things. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks to our listeners. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or drop us a comment if you've got any questions. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Until next time, this is So in the Know.